Hey, everybody on Facebook. You're going to see what we do when we're off the air here. Oh, geez, I need Celina's number. Let's see. It's right here. No, wait. I just called it, so I can make it a redial. And now we put this back, or hopefully it can be seen.
Hello?
Is this the great Celina Summers?
This is the middling to sort of Celina
Okay.
Summers. Yeah, how are you doing, Marky?
I'm fine here. It's the... Try to butter up the people here a little bit, you know. It's... and I am impressed with your creativity as well as your... You know... You're a monster on Twitter. I mean, you know, forget about monsters in the novels. I mean, this is just, you know, impressive what I see here. Anyway, I'm going to come back with standard sports music here. A second. And we're doing that. I actually enjoy this Facebook Live thing. Now I can probably put the show up on YouTube if everything works. I'm hoping that the speaker will be picked up here on the smartphone. And yes, this is behind-the-scenes stuff that you're watching live right now on Facebook Live, Tri-City Sports Now. So, there we are. Let's see here. The Phil Fulmer hire. I'm surprised. Not that surprised. I mean, well. Actually, we're playing an ad we shouldn't right now, so hold on a second here. We'll come back here. It sounds a little rough. Tri-City Sports Now coming back with someone, I don't know if I should say it's my discovery. I think that she's pretty talented of her own, but I like creative people. I like creative writers, and when you've got someone who writes just extraordinary horror novels or spooky novels or whatever you want to call them that you can find on Amazon, Barnes & Noble under Celina Summers. And I mean, that makes a great gift for Christmas and all that, especially if you like to think out of the box. But also is just a monster when it comes down to covering who the next Tennessee coach will be. You can follow her on Twitter and what some of the comments that she has made are, as well as just read her stuff on the Orange and White Report on Medium, which is actually where you can also read some of my stuff, such as Marky's monologue that begins the show usually every day. Well, it's Celina Summers, and I'll just ask you here your thoughts. 4 o'clock Friday, it's announced that Phil Fulmer is the new athletic director of the Tennessee Volunteers. What were your thoughts at the time?
My thoughts at the time were, thank God. I think pretty much everybody had the same thought. Because, you know, last week when you and I talked, I made a strong case that we needed somebody with Tennessee roots to be involved in the process. And I think that the ouster of Curry has now put Tennessee in the position where Fulmer is running an extremely methodical and proper coaching search, which is absolutely what needed to happen.
Well, why do you think it is a proper coaching search as compared to before? Now, I mean, we've heard all the rumors about Jimmy Haslam. That was Greg Schiano was Jimmy Haslam's choice, that sort of thing. But it seems to me right now that the coaches that are being considered, now that reports are Les Miles is not in the mix, and I don't know what T. Martin has to do to get an interview, but it's basically a field of coordinators as well as Chad Morris. Well, Chad Morris was somebody that supposedly Curry talked to last week. So what's he doing now that's right that Curry didn't do before?
Well, he's interviewing multiple candidates, for one. He's not just offering the job to every guy he talks to, which I think is huge. Mm-hmm. And some of the people whose names are coming into this coaching search now are extremely interesting. A lot of coordinators who are ready to make the jump. I mean, Mel Tucker, good Lord, he's got a football resume that not many people could match. He's worked for Saban at Michigan State and LSU and Alabama, and now he's at Georgia. I think he'd be an outstanding fit for the program. Same thing with Chad Morris and what he was able to do, College Football Hall of Fame, with the largest collection of college coaches in the country right now. I think that he is conducting a thorough search with multiple candidates. I think he's looking for the long run as opposed to a short-term fix. If it was a short-term fix, Les Miles might have been a good call. But that doesn't appear to be what he's targeting, and I'm all for that.
Do you know what's different about the College Football Hall of Fame now than it was, say, years ago? Because I've been to one of these inductions. Now, it was when the College Football Hall of Fame, they inducted them in South Bend. Okay, Celina Summers of the Orange and White Report met Reggie White there, as a matter of fact. But it was basically a dinner. I sat down and talked to the newspapermen and all around the country that came up there, and people in South Bend, that sort of thing. My question, though, is, you talk about all the coaches are there at the College Football Hall of Fame. I mean, what's changed in the 15 years since? Because when I was there, it was basically, the people that are getting inducted, their families, and Jeff Long, who later would become the athletic director at Arkansas. I mean, he wanted to meet Dan Marino, who was getting inducted. Who can we expect to be there?
Well, I mean, we know that both Kevin Steele and Mel Tucker are there because they're getting interviewed today. I think Tucker was interviewed this morning, according to verified reports, and Kevin Steele is apparently being interviewed now. So, right now, I mean, Steele, I think he even skipped the Broyles Award thing in order to go to New York City and interview. So, we're looking at a fairly substantial field of candidates that are in New York right now. And honestly, if you have an overzealous fan base that's expert at plane tracking, there's no better place to go to hide yourself in plain sight than New York City.
No, that's true. And I think that, you heard that, the Mike Leach interview was done in Los Angeles, not in Pullman, not in Knoxville, not somewhere else. I kind of think it's not so much that all the coaches congregate at the Hall of Fame. At least from my experience, that's not what they did. It is sort of, well, Phil Fulmer's here. He needs a coach. Can you meet me at this neutral location? It happens to be New York City, and it may work out well here. Hey, we're talking to Celina Summers of the Orange and White Report. Who are you hearing is the front runner?
I'm hearing so much stuff right now, it's not even funny. I would think, just based off what I'm seeing, that we have three solid candidates as front runners. That would be Chad Morris, Kevin Steele, and Mel Tucker. That would be my take on it. I know that Brent Venables has expressed interest in the position, and I can't imagine that he won't get a look. And then to Jeremy Pruitt, his name is starting to come into the mix as well. So, what we're looking at here are experienced coordinators, or, in Chad Morris's case, sitting head coach, with a proven track record as far as that goes. We're looking at guys that I believe are ready to make a jump into a major program.
Okay, but if this was 9 days ago, and just for the sake of argument, John Curry brought forth Chad Morris with his 13-22 record, 7-5 last year at SMU notwithstanding, or even a 7-5 SMU coach. Wouldn't the similar backlash that we had with Greg Schiano take place?
The situation has changed so drastically from the way this all started. I mean, now, let's just put it this way, all right? What exactly did Curry do prior to the Schiano deal? What did he do? Who did he talk to? Did he interview anyone? There doesn't seem to be any evidence that he actually talked to any coach whatsoever in those weeks in between the time that Butch Jones was fired and the Greg Schiano debacle started everything going downhill.
Well, wasn't
then
there
he goes through a week where he's targeting all these coaches, and every time he talks to a new coach, he offers them the job.
Well,
and the damage to the reputation of the university at that point was done.
Well, I guess what I want to ask is, I mean, we had heard stories about Chip Kelly had been offered. You know, that's sort of and Chip Kelly evidently wanted to go to UCLA instead of Knoxville. Well, now, again, that's all the rumor mill. So,
right.
Did he or did he not? One can say I do have some ideas that I'll get to about Phil Fulmer, and did he strong-arm his way into the job or not. I do have some things to say about that here as the show continues. But I just, I look at this. I want to ask, I know that you are very optimistic when it comes to the Tennessee Volunteers and where that they stand in the college football world in 2017. I'm more pessimistic. I see them more or less as a middle-of-the-road SEC program. I think the last 10 years kind of back that up. My question, though, is what can we expect in the future with whatever hire? Has so much damage been done not only with 4-8, but with this coaching search that it's going to be quite some time before this program is going to contend for SEC East riches again?
I think that with the right coach, the turnaround can be made fairly quickly. The problem at UT the past few years, as you and I have discussed before, has never been the talent level. It's been the talent level that's available to play on the field. I mean, these guys were not being properly or safely coached, and whoever comes in is going to address that problem. I think that what I am seeing from the current coaching search is that Fulmer is making a decision based on who he believes is the right fit for the program now, but who isn't going to bolt for somewhere else, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. He's looking for a long-time coach, is what it is. And the Tennessee culture is very different from most fan bases in the country. Now, you bring in a guy who's been a coordinator at Clemson, at Alabama, at Georgia, they're going to understand that culture and be able to deal with it, which has not been the case, I think, for the last 3 coaches that we've had. So, I honestly think that that Tennessee could be surprisingly good again within a short period of time, depending on who's hired.
Okay. We're talking to Celina Summers of the Orange and White Report. I want to ask you about Phil Fulmer and becoming the athletic director. I mean, he's 68. I can't imagine, you mentioned a long-term hire as football coach. I can't imagine that Fulmer will be a long-term athletic director. I can't see him there for 20 years or anything at his age. But what I would ask you is he does have some experience in hiring a football coach. And it's at ETSU where Carl Torbush, a veteran coach, was hired. He was an assistant at Liberty, used to be the head coach at North Carolina, and he was hired to be ETSU's first football coach in their revival of the program. Well, he's 11-22 after 3 years. Does this give you any cause of concern? Because that was a Fulmer hire.
Because you said it was the first football coach in the revival of a program.
Well, the thing, though, is that we could look at, say, Kennesaw State, which, was 10-1 this year and made the playoffs and all this, and they started at the same time. I mean, they've played the very first games against each other, and KSU won by 40.
So let me ask you this. Was Philip Fulmer the athletic director at ETSU?
He was the football consultant, and Dr. Richard Sander, who was the athletic director, told me that basically he asked first Fulmer to be his coach. Fulmer turned him down, which, to be honest with you, Celina Summers of Orange and White Report, I think what's going on right now is kind of a slap to ETSU. Oh, I'll be the AD at Tennessee, but football coach at ETSU, no, that's beneath me. That's the sort of thing that I get right here over what's gone down. But then, and I talked to Fulmer about this last year at Saturday Down South. He said that I kept getting good reports on Carl Torbush, and I could see, here's a guy, Fulmer has been out of the game for a while. He knows Torbush. He remembers him from the North Carolina years. Okay, bring him on. And it essentially was, Fulmer was the guy that was hired to be the right-hand man or a real driving force in bringing back ETSU football. He was one of the highest paid employees at ETSU, making over $200,000 a year, I believe, which is more than what they were paying athletic directors, as a matter of fact. And so that's what I would say. Was he the AD? No, but he really did have he was the guy that hired Torbush. And basically everybody will tell you that.
Right, for a football program that was starting from scratch, correct?
From scratch, yes. I just look at it where I see, it took 3 years for Old Dominion to make the FCS playoffs.
Well, look, you cannot compare ETSU to the University of Tennessee. You can't equate the two programs. I mean, Tennessee is one of the most storied programs in the South. It's been around for what over a century, well over a century. 6 national championships. Top facilities, top recruits. How are you going to compare that environment to ETSU starting a football program again? That doesn't make sense.
I would just say that, you're hiring, it's the basis of hiring a coach. And while ETSU football has always had the reputation of being losers, and kind of rightly so. Since 1970, they've won 7 or more games 3 times. But and Tennessee's going to have all the money and all this. It's an SEC program versus a Southern Conference program. But still, one can win in the Southern Conference. And I guess we were always heard here, Celina, let me just tell you, ETSU now has 63 scholarships. Used to be that they would only have 59. That's all they would fund. And so ETSU always had no one count against them in trying to win on the gridiron and such. And you bring in a Carl Torbush, who may wind up in his 4th year, having the winning record. That might happen. He's always talked about, I have a 4-year plan here. I just look at it as last year ETSU was 4-7, coming off of 5-6. And, this junior year was when we were supposed to see something really happen, and instead the program regressed, their record did. That's right now the Fulmer hire, and so that's who they hired to find a new football coach. And that track record isn't all that good.
Well, from a pool of what candidates do you think stepped forward and said, oh yeah, I'd love to be the head football coach at ETSU? Seriously. Talk to me here. What pool of candidates would actually step forward and say, yeah, I feel like building a program from scratch? Because that sounds like it would be easy and fun.
You would look at their guys who needed coaching jobs, A, but B, you would also look at someone, coordinators, other coaches around college football at smaller programs, I think. But I would also say that, somebody like Forrest Gregg actually left the Green Bay Packers to try to take on the revival of SMU football back in the 80s. That's a pretty big name right there, Forrest Gregg, and it wasn't as if he didn't have a good job at the time. But he was also dealing with the ramifications of a NCAA death penalty. No, I get that, but if you're talking about reviving a program, here, SMU would bring in a big name like that. And it didn't work out for SMU. SMU had boosters who were buying Eric Dickerson cars. But but in the early 80s. But I'm talking about it's 1989. They're bringing back football. Who can we get? I thought it was a very fine hire back in the day to get a Forrest Gregg, who had played at SMU, that sort of thing. He didn't win there. But you talk about who would be interested. There's somebody right there. One might think that Billy Taylor, who is now the defensive coordinator and has strong ETSU ties, he had been the defensive coordinator at a winning program at Tennessee Tech. You look at that. In other words, you're looking at, if you're looking at good coordinators from the FBS ranks, one would think you would look at good coordinators from the FCS ranks. Bill Parcells always was a guy who, after he won the Super Bowl, would sort of say, yeah, thanks, now I want a new challenge. That Patriots team that just went 1-15, that Jets team that just went 1-15, that's where he would go to. I just don't think, I get what you're trying to say, but I think that the situations are so vastly separated that there's no way to compare them. I'm not seeing the connect here, because Eastern Tennessee hired a football coach that has not yet succeeded at a program he's built from scratch on Philip Fulmer's recommendation doesn't mean that Philip Fulmer, who knows everybody in the Power 5 and Division I football,
between you and me.
Yeah, no, that's something. Yeah, you read the same piece in Yahoo that I did. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was Pat Forty's reporting has been so unbiased and unprejudicial.
Well, that was Pete Thamel. That was Pete Thamel.
Whoever it was. They all start to blend together at a while because they're all repeating the same line. Anyway, the point is that Fulmer knows what he's doing when it comes to the University of Tennessee football program. He played there. He was a GA there. He left for a couple of years. He came back and worked his way up through the assistant coaching ranks to head coach, won a national championship, and had one of the most winning overall percentages of all time as a head football coach. He knows Tennessee football.
That's true.
That's what he's done for his entire adult life. That is what Philip Fulmer has done. So there is nobody in the country who could come in and right the Tennessee ship right now other than a Tennessee guy. And that is why Phil Fulmer was moved up to be the athletic director. I don't know how long he's going to be AD. I've heard 2 years, which is fine. But to get the culture and to get the situation settled down, there really isn't anybody better for the position at this point, in my opinion.
Okay, we're talking to Celina Summers of the Orange and White Report and such. When you do say that Fulmer knows all the people, I mean, he's been out of the game for about 10 years. I mean, and so I do see, it's Phil Fulmer. If you ask the Clemson defensive coordinator, they're going to take that call, but I think that any AD would do that, to tell you the truth. I just believe that Fulmer was hired to make a hire that the Tennessee fan base or the Tennessee, shall we say, environment would accept. Because obviously they didn't do that with Greg Schiano. Now, we can argue if Greg Schiano had been brought in by a let's just say Fulmer was named the AD instead of John Curry 8 months ago, and he had, for whatever reason, brought in Schiano, would there have been the same backlash because a Phil Fulmer can sell a coach better than a John Curry? Debatable, because you still had the Penn State mess. But, I think that that's what Phil Fulmer was hired to do, was if it is Fulmer here, he is so beloved by the Tennessee fan base, whatever coach he gives, you could hire the coach at Science Hill, for crying out loud, and they'll say, oh yes, good up-and-comer, that sort of thing. He'll be able to sell it, whereas John Curry, by this time, even Mike Leach, you were starting to think, is that the guy who may have locked a guy in the closet that we want after Brett Kendrick? Because that's what the perception was after John Curry. And I think that's why you hire Phil Fulmer, in my opinion, and all that. Would you agree with that assertion, Celina Summers of Orange and White Report?
I think there is some truth to that, but I also think that if you and I have been talking about this for several weeks. There has been a serious disconnect between the powers that be over the Tennessee Athletic Department and the fan base has just worsened over the last 9 years. Basically since Fulmer was, ousted mid-season. Now, that disconnect is what came to a boil with the Schiano debacle. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee fans, Tennessee local media had enough, and they literally revolted. And to my way of thinking, and this is just my personal opinion, that's a very good thing. And yes, Philip Fulmer was brought in because there's nobody in the country who could have walked out in that press conference as athletic director and immediately calmed the situation down. And I know you've been following me on Twitter for the past, few weeks, and it's been crazy on my Twitter feed, I might add, getting no work done. But you'll also notice that after Fulmer was announced at that press conference, everything just went calm.
Yes, that is true, and I think that
And from a PR standpoint alone, that is huge because in the media business, and you know this, perception is reality. Last week, Tennessee was being slammed by the media, especially the national media, for being a dumpster fire toxic that nobody wanted to touch. Today, Philip Fulmer is in New York at a gathering where there are talking to at the Hall of Fame induction for one of his favorite sons, Peyton Manning.
Speaking of which, what
That,
is there really? How did this divide allegedly with Manning and Martin, Team Martin, start? Do you have any insights on that, or if this is even legitimate?
I have no idea. I really don't. I mean, you know, Peyton Manning and T. Martin, both beloved by the Tennessee fan base, and rightly so, each on their own account. Okay? I can understand if when you're like 22, 23 years old, you kind of get ticked off when your backup wins national championships. You didn't. I get that totally.
Possibly.
But, you know, come on now.
Yeah, I
We're
can't
talking
see
about
a.
grown men now.
Yeah, I can't see
it's
that.
time to, like, change that narrative up a little bit.
Yeah, I can't even see that after 2 Super Bowls and all the money he's made that would be any point of contention. I mean,
I don't think it's any point of contention at all, personally.
Yeah.
I actually think Manning was thrown under the bus.
How so?
I really do. I think Manning was thrown under the bus. I think there are elements around the Tennessee program that are fully invested in making the situation as chaotic and contentious as possible. Actually, if you look at the media that's come out over the past, I'd say 2 weeks or so, you can see a divide in the way that people are reporting on Tennessee football. And it's kind of clear who has his foot in what camp. And I think Peyton Manning and T. Martin both have been victimized by that a little bit throughout this process.
Yeah, the only other question would be, why can't Martin get an interview? I mean, I would think that putting up 30 points every year as a Southern California coordinator, assistant coach, and with his background as a pro QB as well as a national championship QB, even as a courtesy, you give him an interview. Why can't he get one?
I think that it is Tuesday after T. Martin coached for the Pac-12 championship, and I think T. Martin will absolutely get an interview.
Okay, we've got. Wait, I'm gonna. Yes, that's interesting. There you go. Uh-huh.
I know. I honestly believe that because there is such a loud contingent of people that want T. Martin back at UT. Now, whether he's brought in as the head coach or as an offensive coordinator, head coach in waiting, which is what I'm leaning towards seeing, is most of the people on Fulmer's list of names so far have been defensively minded. I think that's the direction that he's kind of looking at.
I think that he'd be very lucky to get Martin to come in that situation for a lot of reasons that I've talked about a little bit before. But the main one here, Celina Summers of Orange and White Report, is that coach in waiting just doesn't work. Maybe it did at Florida State. I can show you Bill Stewart. I think it sent him into an early grave up at West Virginia myself. Hey, Celina, I always love talking to you here. I always like your perspective. You are in the know. And folks, also check out her novels on Amazon, CelinaSummers.com if you're into spooky stories. And it's been quite the spooky story for Tennessee football here these last couple of weeks. Steve Forbes comes up top of the hour, Tri-City Sports Now. Okay. There we are. Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Anytime.
All right. I appreciate that. The only thing is I think that I think that they'll be very fortunate.